first 45 minutes will be a discussion between the three of us. Open, very informal, and it will be in English. The question and answer second half, 45 minutes, can be in whatever language you feel comfortable with. So basically the idea was, there's two early career academics in town. I knew of Umazi, but I had never met her just before last. Amy I've known for a while, and so I thought I would like to have a conversation with them. So I'll use Martin Chautari. So I'm going to talk about stuff I would like to talk about, to learn about stuff that I would like to learn about, and then maybe we can have a conversation. It's very informal, and they will also talk among themselves. It's just a golf session, pure Chautari golf, right? So how I would like to spend this 45 minutes is in three sections. First section, I wanted to talk about just before their dissertation finished, what they were thinking about in terms of their job experiences. The second part, I wanted to talk about, you have your jobs, what are the challenges and opportunities and crises and stuff going on? And the third section is a more free-flowing conversation about knowledge production outside of Nepal, about Nepal. But this will be very free-flowing and open. And I encourage Uma and Amy to talk between themselves, because they also share experiences. I won't talk about them because they're here and they can talk for themselves. So I'll just do some prodding and some questions, right? So first section, I would like to know, again, you're about to finish your dissertation, maybe like the last year. You've got the stress of writing dissertation. You need a Jagir Baira. What kind of what did you actually do? Like, how did you go about applying for jobs? You know that you need a certain amount of articles, referee journals. You know that you need maybe you look for a postdoc. What exactly did you do? And now that you look back, out of all of those challenges, which one to you was the hardest, and which one, getting over, what hurdle made you the most like, aha, I nailed it, right? If you can talk about that. The background being, I talked to Barbara, a friend of mine, I think she's of your cohort. She is a professor in California, and she said to me, I met her years ago, and she said, I had an Excel sheet. Excel data sheet, spreadsheet of colleges, and she methodically went through this application process like a real thing that she needed to conquer. And to me, it blew my mind. That the job market was so tight that you had to do a huge Excel sheet. And from what I understand, other people have copied her and saying this is a good way to nail the job thing. Amy, Uma, whoever wants to take this on.
Sure, so I'll go ahead and start. So I finished my PhD in December 2020, came back from fieldwork in Nepal in 2018. So I had about approximately 2 years between coming back from Nepal and completing my dissertation. And in that time, I had to do a lot of different things that were expected of me, some of which I had not quite understood would be expected of me. So one was figuring out what the dissertation was going to be, right? So planning that out and charting out that. And relatedly, then from the dissertation would I want to publish, knowing that that would be the kind of vehicle for me to get noticed on the job market whenever that time came. And that time came very quickly, which I had not really prepared for. So within probably 4 or 5 months of me coming back from Nepal, my advisor sat down with me and said, okay, the job market is seasonal in the United States. In the US, job market opens up around August, September, and closes around February, with the types of jobs really changing dramatically between those months. So in August, September, you start getting job advertisements for prestigious universities, tenure track job positions, the good stuff, the stuff you really want. Then around October, the postdocs begin to appear. And then by December, January, you start to get advertisements for the lesser valued positions, such as adjunct teaching, which means you're teaching on a contract without any guarantee of further work. or visiting assistant professor, which sounds nicer, but it's still a temporary position, usually for just a year, to fill in for someone when they take a vacation or are absent from sickness or paternity leave or so forth. So my advisor sat down with me and said, this is the job market, and before you come back to campus in the fall, you need to have all of your cover letters done, you need to have your purpose for teaching, statement of purpose for teaching done, all these supporting documents, including something that's pretty unique in the US, I think, called the diversity statement, which is a document that tells the job interviewer how you handle diversity in your research and in your approach to teaching and so forth. It's very peculiar to the US and may no longer be actually required given our current political circumstances in the US. So I had to prepare all those documents. He wanted them done by September, so that when I got back to campus, I could go on the job market. And I could take that cover letter and just modify it for any job that was available. Now, I had barely gotten my head around what my dissertation was going to be like. And now suddenly I was having to put together documents that very concretely said who I was and what my contribution to anthropology was and why I would be an excellent person to hire in a tenure track job position. So it was very difficult conceptually to kind of wrap my head around those two different things, which seemed like they should be happening at different times, but were actually happening at the same time. I was really fortunate because my university had a lot of support system for students like me to prepare job materials. So I had seminars with my cohort mates where we would share cover letters, look at examples of cover letters from past students, and that really helped to make it somewhat easier. And then I did exactly what it seems like Barbara did, which was create, in my case, a Google Doc. And the Google Doc listed every job that I saw that looked appealing to me, and in the order of their due date, and then in very closely tracking what was required in those applications. And then my advisors wanted materials sent to them at least a month in advance with a description of why I wanted the job. So it was a lot of work. Again, that I wasn't quite prepared for needing to do, especially that quickly coming back from fieldwork, when I was still really discombobulated and trying to even just have a place to live. But doing that the first time around was unsuccessful, which it should have been because I had not even written the dissertation yet. But the second fall, I did the same exact thing, and I was successful in getting a postdoc, which to me made a lot of sense because it allowed me to have more time to work on my research. So in the end, it all kind of came together. The last bit of the puzzle, I'll say before handing it over to Uma, is that my funding also dried up by that final year. And so I took on adjunct teaching positions at nearby colleges. So that was me learning how to teach because I was not taught how to teach at my institution very closely. So that was the other bit of the puzzle to figure out after fieldwork. But to your point about what did I feel that when I did it, I felt most accomplished by, it was learning how to teach. Yeah.
And why? What did you do?
Because it was the first time I'd ever had control over a classroom by myself, rather than as a TA, where you're working with a professor. And it was an adjunct position, so I didn't know the students very well. So it was a lot of bureaucracy to learn and manage all in a short span of time, as well as students. And I got over it, and it made me more prepared to do the teaching that I do now, which is very intensive. So that was my kind of trajectory.
My experience was similar, but I'm quite jealous to hear that there was a lot of support from the university and from the supervisors and your advisors, etc. That I don't think that was the case in the UK. But other things were similar because as soon as we came back from field work, I was trying to really understand how to write, because that was something that I was really learning during that time. I hadn't really written a lot of papers or read a lot of academic papers, but I hadn't written anything. It was only after we got those data, from PhD data collection, that we kind of started to think about that, right? So there were two kinds of skills that I needed to build. One was to really understand how to write academically, those kind of like, what am I going to do with that information that I've collected? And second was to really think about teaching and building that kind of teaching experience as well. So as soon as I went back to Oxford, I started applying for these teaching assistant positions. So I was doing a lot of teaching assistants, and to some extent in the UK, teaching assistants do a lot of independent work as well. The professors would do the lectures, and then they would leave the students with the teaching assistant for the seminar. So you have to lead the seminar, you have to really ask them questions and really think about how to prepare, how to really, what are the objectives of the seminars, etc. So you have to lead that completely on your own. To some extent, so that there was a little bit of more independent experience. But I did a lot of different kinds, because the kind of work that I was doing, my dissertation was very interdisciplinary. I was in development studies department, so anything and everything was kind of relevant. So I started teaching with history and politics that was around the world. So that and then some anthropology, some kind of anthropology of South Asia, development studies, whatever I could get. So I did a lot of teaching assistance as well. So, and this was happening at the same time when I was writing my dissertation, when I was trying to figure out what the dissertation should look like and what am I going to do with the data. So that was going on. That was more of like what I was doing to prepare myself. And the way we would apply jobs in the UK is, it usually, most of the jobs in the UK would get posted into this website, aggregate website. And you know that, okay, all the jobs would be there. So first thing you would do is to like set up an alert there, so that you get, like, you'll put all those different kinds of filters, the jobs that you might be relevant, you'll be eligible for and would be relevant and interesting. So that you get these alerts every week, so that okay, these are the kind of jobs that are there in the market, and this is what we should be looking at. These are the departments, these are the universities who might potentially hire me. But at the same time, I mean, it was very obvious that I wouldn't be getting any teaching jobs right after my PhD. So what I was actually applying.
Sorry, why was it so obvious?
Because the market is so saturated and so competitive that somebody who's just finished PhD wasn't going to get any job. I mean, that is like out of imagination. So basically, what I was actually doing practically was looking at a lot of doctoral jobs, a lot of postdoctoral grants. You can also apply to Research Council for postdoctoral grants, right? So fellowships and things like that. So I was looking for that. Main target was that. I wasn't even applying for any teaching jobs at all, because unless you have few years of postdoctoral experience, you cannot really do that. I mean, nobody gets it. You can see in the market that nobody has that. I mean, there will be maybe really rare cases where people have got jobs right after PhD. So what I was doing was applying for a lot of postdoctoral jobs. I was looking at it, but I think what made me, like, give me a bit of confidence was, I think that's what Amy also did, that I started writing some articles, journal articles, but also I sent those manuscripts to PhD prizes. You got PhD prizes as well, right? Did you also send to me in SC?
Yes.
Yeah. So that was a way to kind of tell the world that, okay, I'm doing this work and this. So I think I sent for ANHC, so you sent to ANHC, right? So we did the other way around. I sent to ANHC, and that kind of.
Please explain about this.
I think it's called Association for Nepal and Himalayan Studies. So it's ANHS. ANHS. Yes. Sorry. Yes. So I sent to that, and that kind of like gave me a bit of confidence. Okay. Yeah. I mean, okay. What I'm writing and what I'm thinking is okay, and people kind of like it, and it was okay. So after that, then I applied to jobs, and luckily there was public finance dynamics project here, and that kind of was my first job after first proper job after my PhD.
Not an accusation, but like Amy had a whole Google Doc thingy. So are you So it doesn't sound, you didn't sound as methodical in your
Yeah,
job
because
search.
I didn't have an expectation that I would get a job at all.
You were like so ready to be depressed that you just sort of sideswiped that.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
Just want to make that
Yeah,
clear.
yeah.
So, oh great. So I want to know, so now you've applied, right? Oh, sorry, you missed out. What was the one achievement that you thought in this whole process that really like, this made you think you got somewhere?
I think for me, what I really counted and boosted my confidence was the prize, PhD prize.
Nice.
I wanted to just add on to that because I think you brought up something really important, Uma, that as you're finishing up your dissertation, you want to signal to other people beyond just your department who you are, right, and what you're thinking with, what your expertise are, and so on. So going to conferences becomes really important. And that becomes a way to advertise who you are, but also to develop bits of the dissertation that could potentially become their own standalone articles. And so that happened to me when I was finishing up my dissertation. Is I did a couple of conferences. I didn't go crazy, but I selected the big ones for my discipline and used those as moments to really get something on paper for a chapter, or to move something that could no longer fit in the dissertation into a format that I could make into a journal article later.
What was that strategy for you as well?
No, I don't think I did a lot of conference presentations there. I was really not sure about how to approach that. I would do a lot of student-led conferences in Oxford and elsewhere, but during my PhD, I don't think I did that. I was really trying to really build my skills in academic writing so I did a lot. I attended a lot of writing workshops, and there were a lot of those kind of support in Oxford for that. And I would go to any writing workshop I could find because that's something that I did my undergrad here in Nepal. And that's something that I really needed to teach myself, right? So that was one of the biggest thing I really needed to teach myself. So I went to every single writing workshop that I could see being advertised, and went to that and started practicing all those, understanding academic writing and all that. So I think there was a little bit of other kind of skills that I needed to really learn as well, because I was from a very different academic background, and I was trying to get used to this system where you're just left to do everything on your own. So I was teaching myself a lot of those kind of writing, teaching, leading the seminars. So I was doing a lot of these kind of background work rather than being in the front and presenting myself. But also leading a lot of student-led seminars, doing those kind of things. I was hosting student-led seminars in Oxford, in my department, and other places. I was doing a lot of those kind of things.
Yeah. I wonder if it's a cultural thing too, like in the American context, even in the Stone Age when I went to university, that I remember my professor would always be like, even after the second year, go to conferences, present. Go to whatever idea you have, go. If they yell at you, that's excellent. Go back and get your work done, put it in place. But every year we were forced to present. We were forced. You had to. Honing ideas, but also that kind of ability to present professionally. They were big on that, and just be able to hone all skills. So it might be a institutional, cultural thing as well. So I now would like to go to the second part, right? So now you have, by the way, they have such elite university backgrounds, and these people are struggling to get jobs, or they struggle this hard and work so hard to get jobs. So it's mind-boggling for me. So now you have these jobs. Can you tell us about what are the biggest challenges for you? I'm not sure either of you tenure track. I think you're tenured, no? So what are the biggest challenges now? What is the teaching load? What is the research load? What is the level of anxiety that you currently have? What are the pressures that you currently are feeling? Yeah, sure. Yes, it's okay. Yeah, let's take turns.
Before I got to this job, which when I started as a lecturer, it was in 2022. So I finished my PhD in 2016. So there was a long period of postdoctoral work, right? So I was 2.5 years here at public finance dynamics project, and then I got a Leavy-Hume job, and there was a Leavy-Hume fellowship, and there were some short-term other jobs. So I had to do many years of postdoctoral work to be able to apply or be considered for this.
So you did one more postdoc or two? Two postdocs.
Two. So about 5+ years, 5 to 6 years of postdoctoral work. And during that time, I published. That was my focus. You get time to do research, and that's actually really. Looking back, it's a luxury, right? Because you get full time, like complete 100% time for your research. So I did. So that was. It's not the PhD that prepared me for the job market. It's the postdoctoral work. PhD was just a qualifying degree. Like you're now qualified. You have a degree, and it's the postdoctoral work. And during that time, I published. And that's when I built my CV.
But in the back of the mind, you have like, I need to publish in order to get that job.
Yes, absolutely. That was the priority.
What is the minimum like that I need 1 book, 2 books, and this many articles? Is that like drilled into you? What's the minimum?
I don't think there is a number in the UK, and that makes it even more difficult because there is there's no number attached to it, right? So some people, depending on how you are able to present yourself. People could do it with smaller number. Some people need higher number. So I don't know whether that flexibility is good or bad. So I don't think anybody would say you need to have 5 publications or 10 publications. I haven't seen any job advertisement that has shown that, but the adverts would say that you would have published in this particular field. Mm-hmm. So that was the preparation. So basically, the postdoctoral work is what prepared me for the job market. Mm-hmm. PhD didn't. PhD was that wasn't enough at all. Mm-hmm. And that's when I started to look at different, then the teaching jobs, because then during postdoctoral work, the Leavy-Hume fellowship that I got, that was also very competitive, therefore it kind of added to my CV, so that was really good. And that helped me quite a lot. And then during that time, although it was just a teaching position, research position, I started to teach. It was not required of me. It was an additional job. Everybody was asking, why do you want to do this? But I said, I just want to do this. I developed my own module. I started teaching during postdoctoral work. And this was completely in my own time. Right? So I wasn't getting paid for that at all. I mean, that was additional. It was a contribution to the university where that hosted me. And so so teaching, and then I got it. Because I developed my own module, and I did it independent teaching for almost 2-3 years. So I had that experience, and I used that to get a teaching certification, higher education teaching certification. So once I had that kind of made it easier for me to apply for jobs. Yeah. Now I'm at UCL. I mean, Amy also shares the same thing. Oxford was research-based organized university. UCL is very teaching focused, lots of teaching, there's really no time to do anything else. According to our workload, I get 1 day a week for research.
Mm-hmm. That's it?
Yeah.
And yet you need to produce research,
of course,
right?
Yeah.
So you teach, and then 1 day to do research, which you then need in order to get the job.
Exactly. Yeah.
How much does the teaching student feedback count into this?
Thankfully, it hasn't. I mean, it counts in a very informal way, but that is not used for our formal evaluation. So it's not. In the UK, still, we don't really need to worry that much about student feedback. They will send student feedback, and we have to submit student feedback. But they will just look at it. It's not used for evaluation or any appraisal or any promotion applications.
A little worried. So even if you a really crap teacher, and all students hate you in the UK, then it's still safe?
Yeah, that will be used more informally, right? It's not in a formal process. There will be your line manager will talk to you, you'll have to have a conversation in your appraisal and things like that. But that's actually, I'm quite relieved that that's the case at the moment, because evaluation, I mean, there's a lot of politics around, who judges who is judged as an academic and whose knowledge counts and all those kind of things, right? A person like me may not be or may not get a very good evaluation. So I'm actually, very relieved that that's not the case, but we are going that way. So we have to collect a lot of evaluation. We have to collect evaluation 3 times a term, and all that needs to get submitted. So that process
3 times a term?
Yeah, in one module, 3 times, in the beginning, in the middle, and at the end.
Oh, impressive.
Yes. Yeah, so kind of similar to what you were saying, Uma, my experience in the postdoc was what allowed me to develop my CV enough to be actually competitive on the job market for what the kind of pie in the sky in the US, the tenure track line position, right? So it was during my postdoc that I started to get myself in gear for publishing different articles. And one thing that I had not really counted on was that the postdoc that I took was a very research-focused postdoc, which meant not doing my own research based on what my dissertation had been or what I thought was my program of research, but doing someone else's research, because it was a UK postdoc that was a research postdoc. So I learned a lot, and it absolutely strengthened my skill set because it was an extremely interdisciplinary postdoc, and I was based in the UK, so I got to see a different system and so forth. But it meant that I was still struggling to get my publications out while doing this new research project. But it was during the 2 years or so that I was in that postdoc position that I was able to accumulate enough lines on my CV to be able to move into my job. The job that I moved into was similar to University College London, very teaching focused, and I knew that going in, but it has been a real challenge. Similar to what you said, my schedule basically gives me Fridays to do research and writing, but I have to also use that time for grading and other activities, so it becomes really hard to manage that. And I was socialized in an institutional setting where it was highly expected that I would publish and that I would research. So letting go of that seems to me to be not an option. So I often struggle with the balance of being an effective teacher and giving my students everything that I can and still having enough energy at the end of the day to push out new material and publish and go to conferences and all these other things. So it's definitely been a real learning curve since starting that position. In the US, we have a couple of different teaching loads, as they call them. There's the very light, which would be maybe 1 or 2 a semester, to the more moderately heavy, which is like a 3-2, so 3 one semester, 2 another. And then there's the most extreme end for a tenure track position, and that's a 4-4. And so I'm on the 4-4. But for my colleagues who are not in tenure track positions and who are adjuncting or serving as visiting faculty, they're teaching 5-5. And there's no feasible way to teach 5-5 and still publish and then be able to get those lines on your CV to be able to be competitive in the job market. So it's very, very toxic and very pernicious, and a lot of people burn out at that point, and it's really sad to see. So every day that I feel slightly uncomfortable with my teaching load, I just think myself that I'm actually in a position where I have job security and do have support to keep doing research, even if it's not as much time as I would like. Yeah.
So I now wanted to go towards the last section, which is more free-flowing, but still contoured according to what I think is interesting. Is if we take from what Uma was saying about, you came from different backgrounds, so you're distressed. It's when Brothers had a book on conversations with British scholars on Nepal or something, I forgot the title. I think it was in 2004, it was published by Chautari. He did his work around 2002, I think it was. So we interviewed British scholars at the time about Nepal Studies, right? Why they got into it, blah, 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 and what they thought about it. And in that book, I think there was 13 interviews, people interviews, 3 were women, and the rest were men. But they were all non-Nepali, right? They were all Videsis. Now clearly there's been change in the UK and there's a change in the US. Yeah. That we have changing British academics who are Nepali origin, right? So because we create knowledge outside our academic institutions with other institutions, right? So BNAC, British Nepal Academic Council, and there's other associations in the US as well. How do you see these institutions in how you produce knowledge? Is it just a social hangout? Is it ways to, because BNAC actually has dissertation prizes, which you talked about. How do you I know BNAC more for reasons unknown, but when I used to go to the UK, I've been a couple of times, and I've given talks, it's usually, I see a change in conversation. I'll give my analysis, so you can say, A, your analysis was wrong then, and it's definitely wrong now, and how it's changed. But when I went, there was a lot of older Nepali men who were established, and they had the knowledge. And then there was, again, this is about BNAC, the British population, the British scholars, who, the British are impossibly polite, yeah? And so they'll be so polite that they won't they won't say you're wrong, and they're just nice people in general. And so the prominence given to the type of knowledge that these Nepalis of that age and that gender had was striking, right? I remember going to one conference, and the Constitution had just come out, and there's that whole big thing about women not having equal citizenship in the Constitution, and these men would say, no, it's equal, and so there's no way I could say, if you look in section 3, section 2, so, but now we have younger Nepalis of different ethnicity, of different caste, gender, and I suspect, obviously, that those dynamics are changing. And so how do you interact with those organizations? Clearly, UMA would interact with it differently anyway, compared to Amy. But it's clearly, some of those dynamics are applicable to the American associations, as I've heard from Nepali women employed in the academic sphere in the US as well. So how do you, as early career academics, view these kinds of associations? More social, or can possibly help? How do you view them on the way that Nepal Studies in your countries is evolving?
So I chose my university for my graduate degree in part because it had both a really thriving Himalayan studies program at that time, which suddenly became less so over the time that I was there, but when I started, and then also a stellar South Asian studies program. And I specifically had advisors that were South Asianists, as well as Seira Schneiderman, who was my advisor, who was a Nepal Studies and South Asian scholar. So I tried my best to situate myself between those worlds rather than sticking firmly in just Nepal Studies, both to take advantage of different questions and different kinds of research that are valued in those spaces, and also to meet different people and sort of reconfigure what I thought my research was all about. So I felt very keenly from the very beginning that as someone who was studying Nepal, there was a lot of pressure to not pigeonhole oneself as just a Nepal scholar, that would be very limiting in terms of future job prospects and so forth.
Can I stop you right there? Mm-hmm. That's really interesting, because I was going to ask this question to you too. Mary Duchesne wrote about this years ago, as you well know, right?
Yeah.
About how when she interviewed for a position as a South Asian scholar or just an anthropological whatever job, that they would hire Indians because they had a better notion of what South Asia constitutes than being a specific Nepal scholar. Are you saying that this applies as much as it did to Mary as it does?
Yeah, I had the same question last year, so it still is very relevant.
Same question being, people who haven't read the article?
One of the questions they asked was, why is Nepal relevant for South Asian studies?
Sweet.
And I had to answer that question.
And how did you answer it?
Actually the question was, how does your work contribute to South Asian studies? So this was just last year, 2024.
And how did you answer it?
Yeah, so I try to say that because I bring Nepal into South Asian studies. Because I was also working at South Asian department, and I was trying to do that a lot, right? Because that was really, I had taken that as my agenda to really talk about Nepal quite a lot. Because again, as any South Asian department, South Asian studies department, it was very India focused, and if at all, then it was Pakistan and Bangladesh, right? So I was really trying to do that quite a bit. So, but yeah, I that was published, I think, in 1996, right? That paper around that time.
She gave the paper at that time, but it was published in Sinas much later.
No? Yeah. So, but it's still, that question is still being asked in 2024. So that question still.
Sorry, you interrupted.
Sorry.
Oh, no, that's fine. Yeah, because I mean, it's exactly the same kind of scenario. I think today there's a different way of configuring it. So inter-Asia has become a big keyword for thinking about different spaces and how they intersect in Asia. So I was kind of brought up to think about inter-Asia rather than just South Asia. And then also in my dissertation work to try to contextualize how concepts traveled in sort of a global circulation and then touch down in Nepal and then gets lifted up and taken to other places henceforth. So I was very aware of that and sort of figuring out in my dissertation so that then I could answer those questions in job interviews.
Yeah.
And then I got the postdoc that was just Nepal. So then suddenly I could just gleefully just like stay in Nepal and not have to think about these things for a little while, and now then step back and have to redo it again. But it was fun for a couple of years. And I was in the UK for my postdoc, so I interacted a lot with BNAC and gave presentations there. And then I had always had my home base in ANHS in the United States. And they're very different institutions in terms of their feel and support. I feel like probably today BNAC is more, what's the right word? More organized because they have set meetings they have the study days and they're very student focused and so forth. Whereas ANHS, for reasons I'm not entirely sure of, sort of has dropped the conferences that they used to do. And those were such a lovely space for me when I was a younger student and getting ready to go into job market to meet with people. So now, instead of ANHS, I do interact more with the South Asian Studies at Madison, and they have an annual conference that's really big and really a lot of fun. So that's become a nice space, and sometimes there's sidebar conferences for the Nepal and Himalayan folks, but otherwise it's all everyone together. That's nice too.
Yeah. Yes. So I have been asked multiple times why my work in Nepal is relevant. in South Asian Studies department, I'm at the moment in education studies. I've been in development studies, so generally really have had to really draw on that, and people keep on suggesting that I should do more comparative work so that I also gain experience in other countries. And I'm trying to say that I'm good. Like, so I've till now I've been quite adamant that okay, Nepal Studies is my location, and that's where I would like to kind of base myself in. But there've been like lots of suggestions around that. BNAC, yes, that my field. I've made a presentation at ANC and I've been part of BNAC. With all the problems, I think there's a lot of collegiality within BNAC, and as you said, the demographics changing. And what we did was I was also doing something called Nepal Conversations at some point, and that's when I met Amy, because we started inviting a lot of people for a conversation. I invited Abhinaji also for one of the series. So we kind of before COVID and during COVID, we started doing this podcast series called Nepal Conversations, and so we kind of then contributed that to BNAC as well. So we're trying to do all those kind of different things that BNAC wasn't doing, or kind of like doing it and then adding it to BNAC. So I think with new people coming in, new activities are taking place. There's the PhD dissertation prize, we kind of are in the committee and things like that. So we try to do a lot of those kind of things, and the membership is changing. The executive body is also changing. So yeah, hopefully there's more space and there's more interesting thing to be done there. But generally it is not easy to be just for doing research in Nepal on Nepal and then try to find space in these different big departments. That has been a bit of a struggle. Yeah.
So I have one large chunk of questions to ask before we open it up. One of the things that Nepali academics talk a lot about certainly Professor and I have many conversations on this, is the politics of citation. Right? That a lot of citations in Professor's Vasa is do this theory dance, and there's very little empirical stuff on Nepal. I think I'm less critical of the theory dance than the way that there's a lack, because clearly theory needs to be engaged with, and he thinks I'm too theoretical sometimes, is the idea that there is so much, there's two things to this. There is so much empirical evidence in Nepal that would actually render some of the arguments made in already published articles on Nepal and books a little more sketchy. Like, you can't really say that because there's other evidence that would be contrary to that. Or you've not substantiated it enough with this whole other arena of literature available in Nepal, and especially in Nepal, which is untouched. And so that, for academics based in Nepal, is irking, right? So you do this theory dance, or you do a lot on theory, but you don't engage enough empirically to be able to substantiate that. Right? The second part of this is then the choice of scholars, and so the lack of referencing. It could be historical documents, it could be Nepali authors. So that means you're valuing certain types of knowledge and demeaning other types of knowledge. Right? So Nepalis can't think, Nepalis, they can't think theoretically, and there's a lot of other, as you know. So there's a hierarchy of knowledge. Globally it happens, especially in Nepal it happens, and the things that we are currently iterating, if this happened in India, say some Videsi published something without citing the main scholars, right? They don't in Nepal, they get away with it, right? Which is really annoying at this time of age. And I have to say that this also applies to even Nepalis who have jobs outside and are publishing. And so we have read books, obviously, of colleagues who have written as if this is the newest thing and they've invented it, but there's a whole load of literature in Nepali that was already out there, so, you know, and it's galling, that's the word I'm looking for, it's very, very galling. Now, I know there's a job market, it's very hard to get jobs in tenure, and you need to publish, and there's access to Nepali stuff, blah, blah, blah. How do you, I wouldn't say defend this, how do you situate this? Because there's clearly a dilemma that Uma was also talking about, right? You have a need to get a job, and they look at certain international referee journals, you need to publish here, but you're also not, as a scholar, doing your due diligence, right? You need to know the literature, you need to cite it and say, here's the absence in the knowledge, and this is my knowledge addition. Wow, I've covered all of this territory, and this is my argument vis-a-vis the, and it seems disingenuous at one level, not to do it according to how one should do it. Your thoughts on this?
I'm generally wary of anyone that says that they're doing something new, and when I see that, I just kind of step back and say, why do they need to say that this is new? Like, what's new about this? And so I've tried in my own writing to kind of not go that direction and say this is brand new, uncharted territory, no one's done this before, because it is disingenuous. Knowledge always builds on top of each other, right? So I try not to make those kinds of declarations. The politics of citation is really, it is a challenge. In part too, if you're going for a journal, let's say, journals typically want publications that are 8,000 to 10,000 words. 10,000 is like the absolute max usually, and they'll say that includes all citations and bibliography. So if you're an anthropologist with lots of ethnographic description that you want, right, then that squeezes out some of the space for the literature review section or like a really detailed kind of work there. So then it becomes, and it's very, very daunting to make those decisions as you're kind of putting together an article about what stays and what doesn't. Because then you also think about, well, who is reading this particular article in this journal? What are they going to be familiar with? Can you bring in new sources that will, blow their mind and kind of give them something brand new to think about? That's great if you could do it. But then some of the other citations that you might want to include, because it reinforces, let's say, I'm just picking something so random here, like let's say Bourdieu's Habitus, but it's there's maybe 10 scholars in South Asia that have done that really well, and I'm just completely making this up right now. So which of those 10 scholars do you include? Do you include the one that has the most citations attached to it, who might be from India? Or do you include the person from Nepal who maybe has 2 citations in a journal that's published in Nepal that no one else can have access to because it's not available? It becomes really, really, really tricky. So that's why I think book manuscripts still are so, so valuable, because at that point you can go into a lot more depth than you can potentially do in a journal article. You're not governed by exactly the same constraints in terms of the word count or citation choices and so on. So that it is very, very, very challenging. And I definitely think that people can do it better, but those are some of the kind of real politics stuff about the journals.
That's very kind.
Yeah.
I completely agree with that. And in addition to that, there's another kind of layer to that, to publishing, right? So as I was talking to you earlier, you need to publish in international journals that are ranked and all those kind of scores, different kind of scores, etc. Right? And then what I have found is that I've had I feel that double kind of burden. I felt that a lot, because one is you need to be publishing in these international journals, but nobody in Nepal really reads that. And I'm working on Nepal, and I'm working on issues in Nepal. And then I publish here as well. I publish in Sinas, I publish other places, and people in Nepal would have read that. When I come here, they are talking about that more. So, to be relevant, these kind of, in a way, to some extent, your attempts to be relevant in both places, right?
Yeah.
So I seem to be
straddling to us.
Yeah, exactly. So, and they don't meet, and I don't know what to do about that, right? So I'm trying to really figure out how would these two worlds meet that I'm part of, but then they seem quite separate at the moment.
If I could be a little critical, I don't know if the worlds don't meet. I know a lot of, not a lot, I know of some Nepali scholars who write on Nepal, who have done their due diligence. And so it seems a little lopsided to say that, because we are expected to read whatever's available in those journals, but we are not requiring those who are stating empirical claims and basing their theories on that to read the available stuff on Nepal. That's a double standard to me. And that straddling, the challenges come everywhere. So we're challenged in trying to access this material that is by these. I mean, so it's a politics of publication and that whole capitalist world.
Exactly.
But it seems that if we are going to use this new basa of decolonization and saying, it's a challenge, but these attempts to overcome these challenges must happen now, right, really. And so, I'm just saying that I think to say it's a real challenge, for sure it's a challenge, because I don't have, you don't have the luxury of being in Nepal and having this access all the time, but it still seems to be an excuse for many. I'm not saying it's an excuse for you, or you, but it's used as an excuse not to do the kind of homework that should be required of academics working on Nepal, is what I'm saying. So, if you don't mind, we'll open up the floor and we can always have, come back to many issues. Yeah. Any language will do. I don't know.
Your early academic career, I think Uma will be in a better position to respond to my question. How difficult it is to kind of begin a career being outside non-UK or non-US section, and particularly and particularly being a woman as well, because gender also makes a lot of it's one of the major factors to determine the quality and level of your practices, your efficiency. So I was a bit curious to.
Yeah, I mean, as I said earlier, when I was doing a PhD, when I was trying to write, because I really needed to learn all those skills and that language, the academic language, and really trying to really understand what needs to be done, right? So I didn't have that. I went with like zero knowledge, zero base of that. Right? So I really struggled in the beginning to really understand how to write, what does it mean to analyze and write in academically sound writing, etc. So I attended, as I said, I had to do a lot of that work, which I'm sure other people didn't do. Maybe they went to one workshop or two workshops. I went to every workshop that I could see, right? So, and I would listen to a lot of these coaches, writing coaches, and how they would talk about. So basically, I really taught myself how to write academic English. So that was one thing. So that is like just from the point of view of being a PhD student as well, I was really doing a lot of additional work. And again, for teaching as well is the same thing, right? Because I was teaching here earlier, but then the way we teach in Nepal is different than the way we teach there. So I was learning that. I did multiple TA positions. So a lot of those kind of preparation already, right? So in terms of my effort and time that I was putting in to prepare myself for that world, a lot of preparation. Yeah, and I mean, to make my place in the academic world, I find myself doing lots of different things. Like I did podcasts, and also not just writing, right? I was trying to do lots of other things, connecting with people in different ways. So I was writing a lot of blogs, podcasts, just doing a lot of service work as well. I'm part of BNAC, I'm part of Compare, I'm part of various other part of Sinhas. So I'm doing all these kind of different things as well to kind of to contribute to different community and groups, but also kind of like learn different ways of working with different people. So I feel that, yeah, a lot of additional work to kind of learn, to prove myself, but also to learn skills as well, because these are very different skills that I wasn't aware of, and I really needed to learn and become part of that world and learn that language as well. So, and even in UCL, I think in my department, Tejendra is there, but he's in a different program. So we are very few non-white people, right? So again, nobody would really blatantly discriminate these days, right? But there's still a bit of struggle to find your place and make your place and make your voice heard. So there are those kind of things as well. So, but these are, a kind of part of your work when you're working in those universities and in that context.
Did you want to add anything?
I don't know.
I mean, have you observed this kind of it's really difficult for a foreigner to get a position that you supposedly you can get. It would be a bit easier for you.
Well, I think in the U.S. context, until very recently, depending on the department and the type of job advertised, there were certain advantages to being a foreign scholar right? So I, as a white person from the U.S., if I'm going for a job for a South Asian Studies department and there's 3 other extremely well-qualified candidates who are from the subcontinent, then my chances are, it becomes more tricky, right? So I think it works both ways. I definitely think that now, this is being recorded, right? So yeah, okay. I will guff later. But
no, also job market is really saturated at the moment, right? The academic job market is really saturated. A lot of people with PhDs with very small number of jobs. So as I was talking to you earlier, for a 9-month job that we have advertised at the moment, I am also in the committee and looking at the application. We have had 55 applications. It's a very short-term job. It's not even like, it doesn't even give you any facility. It's just a teaching job. So 55 applications. For a proper job, we have 200 applications. Just one person is going to get it, right? So the kind of job market is crazy. It's like a lottery. It's not even based on qualification anymore. That's what I feel. It's not really based on qualification, because if 200 people are applying for one job, they all have PhDs, right? So if you don't have PhD, they wouldn't even apply, because all of them have PhDs, and 100 of them, at least 50% would be able to do it, right? So you could just pick a person and just give that job. But the competition is so high that, you know, I think I mean, for everybody, it's quite difficult at the moment. Academic job market, UK, US is crazy, and US hiring process is even longer, right? So it's like goes on for a week or something like that. Every day, different things.
Oh yeah, so I can speak because we can speak about this, but yeah, the way that one moves through a job application in the U.S. is it takes a really long time. So you might apply for a position in September and not hear back about your application and the next step until late October. And then at that point, you will, if you're lucky, you got an interview online. And then if that goes well, then maybe 2 weeks later you learn that you're coming to the campus for in-person interview. And depending on the institution, that might be 3 days or 2 days or a week, just depends. And then there will be several weeks after that, usually an additional 2 or 3 weeks before you hear. So it can be a 6 to 8 month process. So it kind of, you have to have a lot of stamina and a good support system to be able to handle all that, because it's very uncertain for really long periods of time.
While doing your postgraduate, was your ultimate aim or preference university job, or you had something else in your mind?
In my moments of darkest despair, I wanted to be a librarian. I was just done. But no, I knew for probably all of my adult life that I wanted to be in a university and be a teacher. Yeah. So I was hell bent on that happening. So I put myself through probably more misery than maybe I would have moving to the UK for a postdoc. I mean, for 2 years, relocating for my family, all that kind of stuff, right? And in order to be better prepared to get the kind of job that I eventually got, yes.
Yeah.
But that's not, so nowadays there is more discussion about alternative careers for academics in the social sciences, even in anthropology. But when I was an undergraduate, that conversation did not happen, and it never really got in my head, and so I always just wanted to do a university job.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I didn't have really. I was teaching here. I was teaching an undergrad program before as well, before I did my PhD. So in a way, that was what I was doing. I was also working in development sector, but I had that. So I suppose to some extent there was some kind of thinking towards that, but it wasn't really systematic. But also another, going back to the previous question on struggle, I had to do another master's in UK to get admission in. So I had to do a second master's in the UK. I had my master's from India, but nobody said that you couldn't get in because you have a master's in India. But I didn't get in. Then I did one more in the UK and I got in Oxford. So I mean, I was the same person. So there was these kind of layered, multiple layers of work that I had to do, which was more than I think other people would do. And in terms of the job, I don't think I had any plans because I wasn't really confident that I'd get it. So in the beginning, I didn't even apply. I wasn't looking at it. So I knew that I would want to do some research work. So I did apply for postdocs and things like that, but I didn't even apply for any job at all because I wasn't confident I would get it. So I was really focused only on research-based job, and that's when I realized that these research-based positions are very short term, right? So like until the grant, and then I have to apply for another job again, and then I came to a point where it got very tiring. I was just writing out grants after grants after grants, right? And it's very competitive. And that's when I said, okay, maybe I should now apply for a job, because I had now teaching qualification as well. I had a certificate, and so I used that to apply. So so there wasn't really systematic plan to go into teaching, but that was the setup I was in, and so that kind of I started to apply. But in the beginning, I wasn't confident I'd get it at all, so I didn't even apply.
I could also add that Anubhav and I worked together for 2 years, yeah? And so I did also get a chance to see what a more development type job might be, or humanitarian type job might be. And while I really appreciated it, I realized during the course of that work that I was better suited to do the research and possibly teaching in the future. So I did have an opportunity to see something else and made a decision. So.
Yeah, thank you for this very interesting conversation. Uma, it was based upon some of the things that I wanted to ask. For example, like you emphasize a lot on how you prepared yourself for the teaching job, particularly during your certification for teaching in higher education. I mean, both of you, in the sense of these early career academics. So I try to compare with the resident doctors in Nepal. Both of you having a lot of workload, teaching workload, and so to what extent, the university that you are currently working in, to what extent it really supports you in developing these teaching skills. So what are the institutional mechanisms? The reason why I am asking you this is, like, there's a debate saying, okay, so we have, for example, the Faculty of Education within Trivandrum University, which is preparing future teachers. And there's a lot of criticism saying, okay, the faculty that actually prepares future teachers itself does not have certification on how to teach. So in that context, so what are the institutional mechanisms and support structures that really allow you to hone your teaching skills?
I just add to this on this for Uma. Earlier you said that you got a chance to teach them, right? So you have to finish your postgraduate or you are doing research and that, and how is that easy to got that chance? I just want to know that.
Yeah. So it's in terms of the teaching support. There's no. It's not a systematic training program that you could go to. But in the UK, there's something called Academy of Higher Education, Higher Education Academy or Academy of Higher Education. They have a framework for different levels of teaching that you have done, and you can. Universities would run some kind of a training program, like a workshop-based training program that you can attend. But these are voluntary. Like you need to volunteer yourself. You need to enroll yourself to do that. And it's not required. It's not a required mandatory course. But I wanted to do that because I wanted to get that certification as well. I wanted to go through that training. So it's all so basically the whole idea is depending on what kind of teaching that you have done, you could get different levels of fellowships, right? Associate fellow, senior fellow, etc. And that would be based on your teaching experience and the portfolio that you will develop, which also reflects on the pedagogical education literature, like teaching related education literature, but also your teaching practice. So you reflect, it's a self-reflective portfolio that you develop. So there is this kind of framework that you can use, and there's this kind of support, but that's voluntary. It's not mandatory. Like you volunteer yourself, and you need to give time. It requires quite a lot of 6 months, 7 months, 9 month long program, and you need to attend all these seminars. You need to read, you need to write, and all those kind of things. So that's the program that's there, and most of the universities would offer that. So that is one of the formal program. But you could also get support from your senior colleagues, and you could ask them to come and observe and give feedback. Those are more informal support. And at UCL and at Oxford as well, I got a lot of that. I could go and sit into people's lectures and seminars and learn from how they were doing it, right? So I could model them and see what was working, what was not working, what could I do, things like that. So a lot of, again, self-initiated kind of learning of teaching. And for answering your question, I was at Oxford in South Asian Studies department, and I was a human research fellow. I was a postdoctoral research fellow there. So because I was already there, they kind of, it was my, again, developmental opportunity that they gave. And I developed this module and I shared with them. They said, oh, this is really good and we'd like to take it forward. And they really recommended it forward, and they got it approved. So it was because of the really great colleagues that I got that module approved, and I was able to teach.
Yeah, so for my experience in the US, when I was at Yale, before I went to do my PhD fieldwork, I was a teaching assistant, and there was no institutional support to learn pedagogical practice. It was all undertaken by your faculty mentor. And so there, depending on what faculty member you're working with, it might be very hands-on, or it could be very hands-on, right? So when I came back from fieldwork, I found myself needing to teach to keep a scholarship, basically. And at that point, so it had been like 3 or 4 years later, there was a system to provide training for graduate students in teaching. It was voluntary, so it wasn't mandatory at that time. Possibly it's mandatory now, but at the time it wasn't mandatory, but it was nonetheless a series of classes that you took over a semester, basically to become conversant in different styles of teaching for different skill sets and aptitudes and so forth. And so that was my first glimpse into, there's a pedagogy of how to teach. Everything else had been just hands-on and observational. When I started to teach at my current position, I was very pleased that they had a Center for Teaching and Learning, and there was no requirement to go to it, but they just had so many classes for all different kinds of teaching styles, and online teaching, in person, working with students with accommodations, right, learning accommodations. So, like, they wanted you there. And so I've actually done a lot of classes with them because that was an area that I felt least confident in going into my job, was teaching, because I'd not had as much training in it. And so I wanted the support, and they were very happy to see me. And so they're very happy to spend time with me. I also think it's really interesting what you said about the module and creating a module. So when we go on the job market in the US, you are usually asked to submit a syllabus or more than one syllabi for a class. Now, you probably have gotten a packet for a course, right? It's just the readings that you're doing and the assignments, right? It doesn't demonstrate what you're actually going to do as a teacher. And I think that's a disservice maybe for our version of the job market, that it just lays out what you would want to teach in terms of topic and like what assignments, but it doesn't demonstrate how you actually would go about teaching that topic. And so that's when you get to, usually at the campus visit stage is when you suddenly demonstrate yourself as a teacher. You stand in front of a class and you give a lesson. But maybe training earlier for graduate students to kind of develop that for themselves would be more beneficial instead of just the 16-week syllabus. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah.
I have a question. I have so many questions. I wanted everybody else to be done before I started my ranting. But first of all, I feel really bad because if you guys are early career people, I am a fledgling inside eggshell career person. But I graduated in December from my undergrad, and I never really looked at my teachers as academics. They were just there to teach me, and like maybe some admin assistants, you know. So I feel really bad for that right now. But I'll boil down my questions to like the three main rules. So based on my assumption of my teachers as well, I've heard a lot of talk about how difficult it is to juggle admin work and teaching work and like academic work. So like how, I've heard a little bit of the juggling the teaching part and your own research interests. But how bad is the admin responsibility and teaching?
Yeah, I mean, as a postdoctoral researcher, I didn't have an admin, so that was like, looking back, I feel that was like a really good time. That was a really wonderful time that I had because that was like 100% research, right? And I did teaching because I wanted to. Nobody really forced me to. But at the moment, I really don't have any time for research, and I have to take leave to do my research. That's what, like, I took some leave to come here and do my data collection. So so that is definitely there. But admin, there is some admin that I have to do. But then I was just talking to Amy that actually teaching load is so high. Like, for example, I mean, it's slightly different in the UK because I especially for undergrad programs, that we have to do multiple seminars. So I've got like, we don't have this kind of really clear workload calculation. There is a discussion going on in my department for that. But like my module has around 120 students. It's an optional module, and then I have to do at least 5 seminars a week, at multiple, same seminar 5 times, because seminars are smaller, right? So around 50 seminars a term. So it's like crazy amount of very robotic to some extent after some time, right? It's like a huge amount of contact hours, a lot of repetition of the same work. And so actually, and I had another, like every term I would have similar kind of workload. So admin is there, but because the teaching load is so high, I actually chose to do admin. I applied for the admin role, and at the moment I'm the deputy program leader for the undergraduate program, which has 450 students, right? So, and it's quite interesting because there's a very different perspective on teaching. It's very different perspective on the university and how it works, how it recruits students, how it recruits different teaching staff, teaching assistants, etc. So that gives me a very different kind of perspective. That is quite a lot. But for me, it looks like less than teaching, so I'm quite happy to take that. I actually applied for that job and got that job so that my teaching could get reduced. And in addition to that, these are just within the university, like the kind of work that we do. These are like admin with service to the university, right? The admin, teaching and research is like within the university. But we also contribute to the community, like general academic community outside. So there's a fourth level of work also we do, which is completely voluntary again. Right, so be an AC, or I'm at base, or compare, or different kind of these kind of society associations, like learning societies. That's what we call in UK. These groups. There's a fourth dimension also, which is outside of the university, but it's equally important, right? Because we want to contribute to this academic community globally. So there's that as well, and these are again voluntary. It's in your own time.
Yeah, so I think about admin in 2 categories. So my administration of my students and grading and sort of classroom management things. And then I think about my service. So Uma, you were describing service outside the university, but there is an expectation as an early career person that you will take on some kind of role within the university to provide, to work on a committee that could be, for example, the curriculum committee to vote on new courses that are being adopted. Or I'm on the Dean's Committee, so I help sit around with other faculty members and work with the Dean on policy decisions and things like that, right? So that work happens, and usually for the early career folks, at least in the US, it's very slim expectation, and it builds up steadily. It's like they just add another weight onto your back year after year as you march towards tenure. So that's sort of how it's situated. And in terms of like student admin, it's quite a lot because there is an expectation and a desire, I would say, to be close with your students. So if they send you an email, to be very timely in your response, like within 24 hours during Monday through Friday, right? I always say I don't work on the weekend, so I'll get back to you Sunday night maybe, or Monday morning, right? So you can set some boundaries there and make it healthier. But there is an expectation that you will be there for your students and will grade things on time and respond to emails in a timely fashion and so forth. For me, I teach 4 classes a semester, which means that I meet with my students for each of those classes twice a week for like an hour and a half period of time. So that's a pretty full load. But one of the biggest things that I enjoy about being an academic is that I get to choose my own schedule. So I have it set up so that I teach 3 classes 2 days a week and 1 class 2 days a week. I have other colleagues who teach all 4 of their classes 2 days a week, and then they have 2 days that they technically aren't in the classroom and sometimes just work from home those days. So there's flexibility there. And then my teaching contract is 10 months, so I have the option if I wanted to teach in the summer, and I choose not to at this point. of my life, and so that means I can come back to Nepal and do research or do other things with my time, right? So that restores some of the balance from the busy semesters. You don't get paid during those 2 months, but your job is secure and you go back to it in the fall. So there are ways to manage things, and depending on what you have going on in your life, if it makes sense to be on campus only 2 days a week, then you can actually make that happen, generally speaking. They really are quite flexible with that, so that's nice. At least in the US. I'm not sure about the UK.
Can I continue with the rest of my sorry?
I think she has a question that we can
My question is specifically for Umaji, but Annie also can respond. What did you do work-life balance in the context of as a foreign scholar and a female and a mother? Because you already told that there is discrimination between native and non-native. So how did you cope those challenges around that context? I want to know.
I mean, there is no work-life balance at all. So I don't know what to say about that, because there isn't. Especially when I was doing PhD, because I had a young child, right? So, and I was trying to balance that and the family life and just generally other things as well. So, I mean, and especially when I was applying for grants, I was working like most nights, so because, again, grants have to be written, you don't get paid to write grants, right? So, I mean, you're writing it so that you would get a job, basically, again, because and they are very competitive and lots of processes and multiple grants. It is very difficult. I try to, now that I have a proper long-term job, I don't know when my promotion would be, so I'm not really working towards that at the moment, so I can take it a little easy, and I say that I can take a break, take breaks and take holidays now. But when I started, like from the time I started PhD until I got the job and kind of settled down in this new job, I don't think I took many holidays. Also, now my daughter has gone to the university, so that's like one responsibility less in terms of like I don't really have to take care of at home. So that's okay. But yeah, so it is difficult. And also, as I said, I was doing a lot more of training and going to all this everything. That requires a lot of time and effort and just doing all those kind of things. So you try to balance as much as possible, but also trying to work quite efficiently and not take too long to do anything. I mean, I taught myself to write very quickly and or develop a system where I would do more regular work, because I've never experienced a day when I would write the whole day or 2 days in a row. It was never I've never had that kind of luxury, because especially in the beginning when I was doing my PhD or when my daughter was in school, I had to go and pick her up by 3 o'clock, right? So my day would end by 3 o'clock, and then my evening other schedule would start, and so I had a very short day compared to other students, other colleagues that were in the same department. So I developed kind of I suppose, there's no systematic system, but I suppose my coping mechanisms, I developed different coping mechanisms to kind of figure things out. But I don't think I had any work-life balance, so I don't think I can really
It just sounds like so much hard work, so much hard work day and night, that there is no life right outside of academia. Very hard to achieve unless you strict boundaries and such. So we have Papa, because you've not asked a question, why should we give that? Let's go to Papa and then Papa.
I have a very quick question anyway. So to Amy, so what was it about working in the development sector that reaffirmed your desire to come back to academia?
Can I just stop you there? Yeah. Can we stay a little longer? I don't know what
Sure,
you're
yeah,
There seems to be a lot of interest, maybe another 15 minutes.
Sure.
Sounds good. So I learned that I don't like having a boss, basically. That I would get, so I'm looking at Anubhav and I were in the same teams, and I just didn't always enjoy being told what I needed to research and what kinds of questions I need to ask or how I should ask them. And I was an anthropologist as an undergrad, and I had done a Fulbright for a year doing my own research. And I was also like 23 years old and thought that I knew everything, right? So I didn't want someone telling me that I needed to do my work in a certain way, which was way more political science, quant heavy, sort of comparative work than what I was used to. So I kind of bristled under that and realized that I just wanted to have my own project where I could develop it and kind of create collaborations but not have to be dictated to about how I did my work.
So it wasn't about the wackiness of the development center in Nepal?
Not especially that particularly, because I think that was replicated other places too. Like I had a short job in the U.S. where I had to go around at home department stores and try to convince people to get showers installed, and I was terrible at that too. So I just didn't like being told what to do, basically.
Yeah. Sorry, to you and then probably to me. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So I have two that I will distill into one. So as someone who's looking to go to walk the same path as you guys have, I have, or at least we have a very, as younger people, a very romanticized view of academia, of like, oh, you just wear your outfit and then go into class and then teach and then maybe a little reading, da da da. But I can see that that's obviously not the case. But how much of your research interests did you actually get to pursue, and how much of your work is something that a circumstance or like opportunity pushed you into, and how much of it was something that you like genuinely really dreamt of?
Yeah, I would say probably close to 100%. Yeah. So yes, again, this is what makes this is what makes academic life, when you are able to navigate it into something like a tenure track job, very appealing.
Yep.
Because even when I was in my postdoc, I applied for that postdoc because the topic was interesting to me. It wasn't the same as my dissertation. It brought me in a different direction, but it was a direction that I wanted to go. So I used that as kind of a second, almost mini PhD to do a totally different type of research and develop a whole new skill set. And I was very happy that I got to do that. I mean, has it delayed me being able to write a book? Yes, yeah. But those were just, the circumstances that I was dealt. So I think also I would bear in mind that we're talking about early career stage. What you're describing about, rolling into class and teaching, like that can happen when you're, I think, more in the, at least that's what I look forward to as well. So I think that happens after the tenure stage, especially whenever you've taught the same classes for a number of times, and those, you don't have to do as much prep work necessarily, you're just kind of updating things. Maybe you're teaching fewer classes because you have seniority. So things, I like to think they'll get better. I don't know. Yes. So we're really in the trenches right now, I think, in our careers. So we're reflecting that, I think.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of research and topic, I would agree with that because, we do get to choose what we're teaching. I mean, especially like during postdoc as well, because that's the research that we wanted to do, and that's why we applied for that, etc. Right? So it's a very topic, interest-based kind of work as well. And later we are asked to develop our own module in our job application, in our presentations. Basically, we're talking about what we would like to teach, so that's okay. So in terms of aligning with our research interests, that's I think if you're not in a short-term teaching-based jobs, I think you get to do what you want to do. So 100%, that is definitely there, and that's the advantage, I think, right? So I'm interested in education, just generally, like more social and political aspects of education, right? So I got to develop a module called Education, State and Society. I could choose whatever I wanted to teach in that, right? So that was really good. And again, in UCL as well, similar kind of, it's a module that I developed, and then I could contribute to other modules that are similar to my interest, right? So research methods, or something called education in age of globalization, basically similar kind of like. So in terms of the topics and things that you're doing, I think we are in a better position. There might be people who are in a short-term teaching position who have to just teach whatever they have been given. right? So we are not in that, thankfully, and I suppose we are more privileged in that way. Yeah.
Was it?
Yeah, so I mean, to remain relevant in the market, so this, you have to constantly repackage, rebrand or brand, and you already talked about the challenges of, trying to stay relevant. South Asia trying to stay relevant, like Amy, you talked about Trans-Asia or Inter-Asia?
Yeah, Inter-Asia.
So, in your own personal careers, as well as in the larger scenario of South Asian academics within your institutions or within the institutional settings. So, how is this repackaging, rebranding being constantly done to stay relevant?
Yeah.
Can I add to that? It goes with what. Okay. It goes with what conversations I've had with people in academia at my age and older. So I've had these conversations with people you would know, but I don't want to name, right? In the West. And Nepal, but in the West too. So people who have retired, people who are about to retire, people who did their dissertation work maybe a year or two before me. So there's this conversation about there is a willingness, or we see in the younger generation of academics in the UK and the US, for gaining, I'm trying to get a better word for this diplomatically, which is not very skilled, a lack of levels of modesty. There's a self-aggrandizement that is quite evident, right? So the need for a job is there, but I am the Nepal expert, and the type of you understand, self-advertising, that it's just not me, it's just not my friends here, but people outside are also really uncomfortable with. Now, it seems to me, A, it's a factor of this very tight job market. B, it's obviously personality driven too, clearly, and that kind of personality would do very well in this job market. And 3, it's just, I don't know what it is, it's a weird phenomenon that makes me and many others very uncomfortable, right? And it seems to me it doesn't work to creating a larger Nepal community of learners who are willing to share and gain. Now, obviously, I'm just using you as a sounding board, right? Like, give me insight into what these young folks think. But clearly there are dynamics that weren't as prominent, and it kind of goes to repackaging, and there's this level of being, with it. So any thoughts?
So I guess by the time that I was writing up, it was encouraged for me to have like a social media account and make sure that, it had my name and what things I like to research, and that I should, post things that were relevant and that sort of stuff. It was never very supervised. Like, it wasn't like my supervisor said, "Where is your social media account?" But I wonder if that is actually part of professionalization now in the training. It just wasn't as huge a feature. It just came in later for me. I thought it was a big deal when I got an academia.edu account and ResearchGate, and I got my own website, and I paid 99 cents a year for it, and I think that's about as much as I can handle. And now I really stepped back from social media, and I don't do it anymore because I feel like it is self-aggrandizing, and that's really contradictory to my character. So what I try to do is just to publish and to present and to be present in spaces like this, and hopefully that speaks for itself, and that someone who is, just all guff, eventually gets kind of figured out that there's nothing substantial there. But it is very frustrating, even from the perspective of someone in my position, that gets people very far when there maybe is not as much reason for them getting as far. But again, we're being recorded, so
I understand.
That's the thing, right? Because academic work is, again, it's not just about working in the university, and that's the kind of message that we are given as well, where it's also about bringing this personal brand, like what you stand for, what you do, what is expertise, etc., and how would people know about that. Academic paper is one thing that would tell that to the academic community, but then universities also want that individuals' brand to be associated. So individuals, in a way, in academia, individuals are also brand, right? So and that's what I think the branding kind of like. And it's a lot of, I don't know how to do that. So it's not my strength at all. And I struggled with that quite a bit. Because I am now in some leadership positions, I go to these leadership trainings, and one of the things that we are asked to do is that how you're building a brand. And I don't know how to do that. So that's the thing. But also what is also happening is that it's also different levels of work that you're expected to do, right? As a PhD, the kind of work that you're expected to do, and an associate professor, the level of work that I'm expected to do is different. Mm-hmm. So you can't be, and that's another message that I'm kind of receiving, right? You cannot be doing the kind of work that you were doing as a PhD student. Yeah. There has to be a different level of work that you need to be doing. And so it's a never-ending kind of a shifting goalpost, right? You never achieve what you are asked to do. There's always something more to do. There's always something else to be. Like it's never enough. So that's the kind of feeling that I get. Like there's always something to do, and even branding. Even that, right? So how do you do that? I don't know. How many times you need to post? What kind of things do you need to post? I'm not very good at that. So I'm struggling with that.
Sorry,
thank you. So this is a conversation that terrifies my girlfriend actually. So what do you think of a passive PhD? So of a passive PhD, so basically you work, so I currently work in the development sector, and my workload honestly is next to nothing because I used to work at Baha and very rigorous there. So what do you think of doing a PhD while you're working in the development sector? Will it benefit in terms of self-development?
Okay. Do you mean at the same time they're pursuing?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean.
And will it kill me?
Will it kill you? Well.
So you mean like a part-time PhD?
Yeah.
So that wasn't my experience. I didn't have that option. So it was a full-time PhD. So I got a stipend, and I was expected to be on campus and those sorts of things. I do know lots of people though that have taken 10 plus years to finish their PhD, largely because they had other responsibilities, care, or work. So it's not outside the scope of possibility, but I just don't have, that's just not my experience.
That laugh alone was terrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it is not impossible, right? Again, I would say that it will depend on the person as well, how much they are able to manage their time and commitment and various kinds. But again, one thing is that doing a PhD is a very different kind of skill, and working in the development sector is a very different kind of skill, right? So you cannot. You might have an understanding of the issue because you've been working in that, and you know better than just a fresh undergrad student who goes, or a grad student who goes into a PhD program. That knowledge and understanding of the world would be different, but the skills are very different. So you have to kind of develop a very different set of skills as a PhD student. Mm-hmm. And it's not impossible. People have done that, but it's not easy, is what I would say.
Okay, so we go. Sorry.
Is it a go for it?
Yeah, you should go. If I could please, whatever you want to.
I'm just joking. Sorry.
So if we can take last questions, तपाईँ के बाँकी थियो?
मेरो एउटा
तपाईँ दुईजनाको लास्ट
होइन मेरो एउटा मात्रै
मेरो एउटा छ।
This is a new person, one I again this is तपाईँ.
From the perspective of job, it is better to do PhD or DBA. What do you think in your experience?
DBA. What DBA?
Doctorate in business administration.
Oh, त्यो पनि PhD जस्तै होला नि हैन? I wouldn't know. Yeah, I don't know about DBA, but I suppose if it's a doctorate degree and if it's a similar kind of research-based program, and if that's more valuable in a business, it depends on the sector, right? What is valuable?
More money through it, business.
Oh. After sector, ma kun चाहिँ बढी valuable छ भन्ने कुरा हैन? Yeah, it depends, I would say. And we don't know about DBA, so.
तपाईँको last one was.
Mine was related to branding. Sorry.
I don't go ahead.
So I'm on Twitter a lot, too much. And one thing that we've seen is this academic from Cambridge posted her dissertation on Twitter, just being like, nothing really detailed. She was just like, oh, I'm done with my PhD, haha, yay. And that sparked a huge phenomenon. Dr. Abby Brooks, her name is, and she works in her dissertation. The only reason I know this is because I am constantly on Twitter, and I'm not interested in her field at all. Thapathali, it's built her, so her subject created discourse of like, oh my god, social sciences subjects are becoming stupid these days. So it was a negative discourse. And then that looped right into, but actually no, this is really relevant. She was able to sort of ride that wave.
Yeah.
And point out the relevance of her subject in like really mundane everyday things. And it's really easy to build another like tinier waves of outrage on Twitter because everybody's just there to get angry anyway. But she was able to point out these really relevance of her work in daily life, and that has propelled her into public view. And now we're seeing, or at least I'm finding really interesting, the things that she was posting pre-viral days and the things that she's posting post-viral days. Is pre-viral days is just a lot of personal gunfun, and then post-viral days is a lot of, I've gotten this opportunity thanks to your interest, and I've gotten that opportunity to speak at this place and present my work at this place. And a lot of it has been due to online recognition.
Okay.
And whether it may feel, of course, stupid to a certain extent, but it did get a lot of eyes on her work. And she wasn't doing anything special, really. She was just posting about her work and responding to people who were asking questions. That is mostly it. But what I wanted to ask is, do you guys, so when you see people like this, of course she's not the only person to ever benefit from online fame, and I'm sure she's not the first person in academia to do so. But do you see sometimes in your circle maybe younger colleagues or people who are more like online? I didn't mean to say like younger, I'm sorry. But somebody more tech savvy who's benefiting from putting themselves not necessarily in academic sectors. So like you talked about branding and like you talked about doing podcasts and blogs, and all of these things still are professional adjacent.
Yes.
So do you find yourself maybe looking at spheres that are not necessarily within your professional scope and wondering, do you see other cases like that and wondering?
Yeah, so in the U.S., it has become increasingly challenging to have a online presence because of surveillance of things that you do online. So I've personally just stepped way back and avoiding putting myself in a position where it sounds like this person was, where she had to defend her work to trolls and whoever else was online. So I'm just personally wary about doing that. But I also didn't grow up in an environment where I was savvy online. Like that's I'm not that young, right? So certainly if we talk to someone who's a current PhD student, they may have all kinds of ways that they navigate that. So I'm unfortunately just don't have very much insight on it. I will say that when it comes to the job market, your social media is not technically part of your application, but anything that's public can be just, Google search your name and can come up. And so being very smart about that. So I know people who have, separate social media accounts for their academic work and then for their personal life. But what it sounds like you're suggesting is sort of blending the two and like bringing your academic work into other spaces that aren't academic adjacent. And so I think that's where things could get kind of messy potentially. But again, a person who's more tech savvy than me possibly would have ways to deal with that. But I don't, and so I just stay off of it. For better or worse.
Yeah, I think both of us are not very social media savvy people, so we haven't really. What I felt was I just got onto Twitter and people are going out of it, so I came to it too late. So I don't even know how to. So people are leaving X, and going to Blue Sky and different kind of things, right? So and doing more and being more active on LinkedIn. So these are also again like really changing kind of spaces, right? So you have to be really constantly on it too. But I try to do other things as well. Yes, not apart from just doing academic publishing. As I said, I was doing a podcast. I was doing other kind of blogs and things like that. And that's my way of really also reaching out to other audience, right? So it's not like not everybody's going to read these papers which is behind a paywall. And how do I kind of bring those kind of information and insights in other forums that are easily and freely accessible. So I've tried to like experiment with these forums as much as possible, but again that also takes time and effort and all that, right? So yeah.
Last one.
Yeah, well, since you are at a very early stage of career and you're young, so how, I mean, does it ever come, or it doesn't matter, or is it difficult to get accepted by students in your classroom, and not one, and also back in the department room by your mechanics? How, and particularly for Uma's case, since you are non-English, your native language is not English. So does it come ever?
Yeah, I mean, as I said earlier, I mean, nobody's really said that on my face, right? So no, like that's the changing context that we're working in. Nobody will say that, oh, you're a woman, or you can't speak English, or you cannot do anything like that, right? So, but I'm sure that counts, and that's why I don't trust student evaluations. And I mean, as I said, I do find myself working a little extra more. Doing things differently, bringing a lot more creative methods or creative ways of doing classrooms, so that my classroom is different than other people's classroom, right? So there are different things that I do. I bring a lot of materials in the classroom, so it becomes more. I don't like the way I run the class. What I found it easier, and my. Like what has worked for me, but the pedagogical style that has worked for me is to make it as participatory as possible, where I'm not the one who's standing and teaching all the time, because I don't fit the image of an expert professor, right? So I usually do really a lot of participatory, a lot of facilitative kind of work, where there's a lot of activity-based, and that's very interesting for the students as well, and they're not listening to me all the time. I do like kind of mix and match of both, and that's quite interesting. So there are things like that one has to do. I mean, teaching is still okay. I'm in now, as I said, in administrative positions, and that's even more difficult, right? Because you are in a disciplinary role. Sometimes you have to really sit with the students who don't want to do they haven't done the work properly, and you have to tell them more kind of a disciplinary role as well, where you're giving doing vivas and giving penalties as well, and coming like, so that becomes trying to kind of build yourself as a person of authority is like, students will listen. So I mean, it's not difficult. It's not difficult. It's not easy either. But it's like kind of balance that you have to. You have to understand what's happening, what are students expecting, and kind of try to balance it out. Read the room and balance it out. And we have very international students, student body, and even it's not uniform even in the same classroom. Right? Different students react to it in different ways. They have their different personality. So. Yeah, I mean it's challenging, but it's not impossible. And people, I think the way nobody will tell you that, oh, I won't listen to you because you're a woman, right? Or I won't listen to you. It's that kind of blatant that doesn't exist anymore. I have not faced that with a very blatant kind of like discrimination, but I suppose there are different ways in which we have to present ourselves.
Faculty, more senior faculty.
To say, again the same thing. You have to repeat multiple times in a meeting. Yeah, you have to say the same thing again and again multiple times in a meeting to be heard. But also, I mean, to some extent, I've also taken roles that, like I'm a EDI, DEI diversity representative as well. So I kind of like, that's my role that I have taken on as my EDI lead in my department. So there are those kind of roles which kind of, people need to listen to these things, and I had that role formally as well. So yeah, different ways in which I try to do things. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a really good question. So I know in my case, for some of my more senior colleagues, even those that are female, they'll come into the department in very casual clothes and so forth. I've never once done that. Like, I always have heels and slacks, or if I don't have heels, I have just nice shoes and you know, I always look professional. And that's part of developing a persona of professionalism that then my students have to kind of respect it. And so even before I enter the classroom, I kind of come into that space appearing a certain way that then registers in their brain that this is someone who is older than me and I should respect in some ways. Then when it comes to the actual style of teaching, I do a lot more of what you're describing, and it's much more relaxed and participatory in most of my classes. And I recognize, especially the first year that I was teaching, when everything was still really new to me, how could I expect my students to turn things in exactly on time and have, you know, all the, you know, meet every single expectations and standards I expected them when I'm still trying to figure things out. So I was very, I worked with students, let's say, and was very lenient with allowing things to be turned in late. And as long as we had a conversation about it, I would let it go, right? I've had a few cases of students who have not liked something that I've taught, like topically, not because of the way that I taught it, but just they don't like the topic and didn't want it to be part of what we were doing in class. And in each of those instances, those are like the only difficulties I've really had. I've made it a point to meet with that student individually and actually have conversations about it, rather than, let's say, running to my chair and saying, oh my gosh, you know, this student had this problem. So I let my chair know about it, but I'm the one that actually deals with it. And every single case, it's resulted in better relationship with that student afterwards. So allowing them to see that I'm taking them seriously and taking their ideas seriously and willing to work with them has really helped to make that rapport in the classroom good. And so that was a huge learning curve over the first year of teaching. When it comes to my other colleagues, I think I haven't faced necessarily any sort of discrimination because of being a woman or being younger. But I also go into those spaces, again, with not letting anyone take anything from me, basically. So I come into those spaces professionally, and I put on a persona of some kind of authority, and when I have something to say, I say it. And I don't shy away from it, and give them an excuse to treat me like I'm not able to contribute to the discussion. But it requires me to think about it. But I have not faced a situation where someone has turned down an idea that I've had or treated me in a way that I felt was discriminatory at work. So I think things have really changed quite a lot over the last 15 years, probably, of academic life. So these are good stories.
Yeah. Yeah. But at the same time, what you're saying is, in the classroom, there's a lot of like these kind of emotional care work that we're doing, right? Which maybe other professors may or may not do. I don't know whether we like similar to what you say. We are really like almost like motherly kind of a care to our students as well. They come to complain. I mean, I have this like a lot of times, and I have tissue paper, chocolate, and water, and they want to cry. They can just come and cry, and I let them cry for 5-10 minutes, and then come and like they talk to me after that, right? So, and they do find us approachable, I suppose, to do all that, and they have a lot of those kind of struggles going on, which is related to academic, but also personal. But then it comes back to academic because it affects their academic work, etc. Those kind of things as well. But I suppose that comes as like because of our gender, and we become more approachable in that way, where people can come and share their, which is actually good. That helps us to build our relationships with students, but also that it does take our time and effort and emotional labor as well.
Sure. Well, it's 5 o'clock. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I really hope you guys, you both enjoyed this conversation as much as I did.
Thank you so much for all the questions.
And, thank you for coming. This format worked, yeah? My first video. We tried this format with Omina first, as this conversation.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah.